Break Ranks is presented in association with Bands of America's Sun Safety partner, Outrun the Sun. This is the podcast helping to create, provide, and expand
winners in life.
Positively life-changing experiences through music for all.
Go for it!
This is the podcast that encourages everyone to
Break Ranks!
This week on Break Ranks, it's time for a sound check.
If you want to see band directors get really nervous, start messing with knobs.
I wish we could do our sound check, not in front of the public eye, but that's not the case.
With two of the very best sound engineers in marching band, Erik Kosman.
I'm a big believer in checklists. Every piece of equipment should have a checklist.
And Tony Lymon.
A lot of times we'll buy this equipment looking for a reason to use it.
It's all about finding the right balance.
The last thing I want to do is turn on a microphone, I think.
Well, I'm turning all of my microphones on because you need to hear this.
We'll just have a discussion together.
It's a balancing act, this time on Break Ranks. But we began, as always, with a look at the recaps. Starting out on the Permian Basin in West Texas, where Nick Costello was on the mic.
And in first place, with a score of 80.0, the 2025 Bands of America West Texas Regional Champion, the Midlothian High School Marching Band from Midlothian, Texas.
The Midlothian Panther Regiment from just south of Dallas-Fort Worth made a worthwhile trip to High Plains of West Texas, taking outstanding music performance and outstanding general effect to win the West Texas Regional. Trinity High School, also from the DFW Metro, was just over a point back in second, with Odessa Permian third. Now, in prelims, Trinity High School, which is the sister campus to former BOA Grand National Champion L.D. Bell, Trinity made school history with their first ever BOA Class Championship, taking home the 4A medallions from Midland. Congratulations to Chris Kanicki and everyone involved in the Trinity Trojan Band program. Midlothian was first in 3A, Texas Lubbock Cooper High School topped 2A, and Hope High School from Arkansas medaled in 1A. Next up, the other Texas Regional from this past weekend at Prosper High School, north of Dallas, which is where John Pollard was doing the talking.
And in first place with a score of 87.9, the 2025 Bands of America North Texas Regional Champion from Flower Mound, Texas, the Marcus High School Marching Band.
It was a caption sweep for the Marcus Marauders, finishing almost 3 points ahead of second-place Wakeland High School, who squeaked by third-place Capel High School by 15 1/100ths of a point. Marcus was also the 4A class champ at Prosper. Wakeland snagged the 2A medallions, and Commerce High School from East Texas was the 1A champ. Our third and final regional this past weekend was in Memphis, Tennessee, where a band from Oklahoma came out on top.
In first place, with a score of 84.5, the 2025 Bands of America Memphis Regional Champion, the Mustang High School Marching Band from Mustang, Oklahoma.
Announcer Alex Quintero giving the members of the Mustang High School Band something to smile about all the way back to the Sooner State as they finished less than a half point ahead of Bartlett High School of Tennessee. Mustang took the music and GE captions, with Arkansas's Cabot High School winning visual. In prelims, Tennessee's Cascade High School was tops in 1A. Arlington High School of Tennessee is the 2A champ. Mississippi's DeSoto Central wins 3A, and Mustang also claimed the 4A medallions. We're trying to achieve a balancing act this time on Break Ranks and talking audio with two of my favorite audio engineers. Tony Lymon, who's been on Break Ranks before. 2 years ago, we kind of gave a broad overview of the mixing of sound and music and sound reinforcement for marching band. If you want to listen to that, I highly recommend it. Go to season 1 of Break Ranks, episode 4, and Tony and I really get into the weeds about everything related to sound reinforcement. And welcoming Erik Kosman from Austin, Texas, who has mixed for many drum corps, Mandarins, I think most recently, and several great Texas high school marching bands, and consults many other pageantry units as well. Hi, Erik. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Tony, how are you?
Hey, Dan. Good to be back.
Glad to have you back. This time, and again, I encourage people to go back and listen to Tony's show back on season 1 for the broad overview, because this time we are taking a single topic, maybe the most important single topic when it comes to sound reinforcement for marching band. And we're going to drill way down on this and get some very specific answers and help from these two experts for your band program on how to balance your ensemble. That's the balancing act we're trying to achieve here. And would you guys agree, Erik, starting with you, that that is priority number 1 for any audio engineer and any sound reinforcement aspect of a band program?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the term sound reinforcement implies secondary. It's a supporting thing. It's to enhance what is there acoustically. So I always say that the best compliment I ever can get from somebody is silence. If we do our job correctly, it shouldn't even be noticeable. It should just be so clear and transparent that you don't even think about it. So that's always the goal.
Tony, balance priority 1?
Absolutely. And I think because we've introduced all of these computers and mixers and electronics into the mix, I feel like we kind of gravitate away from what we know, which is, I always tell everybody, you just need to use your band director ears. You do the same things, how you balance your wind ensemble, how you would balance your marching band without these elements. Close your eyes and make sure that the sound that you're hearing is the sound that you would hear in your concert hall. And that will lead you to the place.
Okay. I guess maybe the best place to begin is at the beginning of a season when you're just putting the first ensemble rehearsals on the field. Where do you even begin, Tony?
Well, I know this sounds very elementary, but you want to make sure that everything works. You want to make sure that you're getting signal flow, which means that everything that you've connected to your mixer is working and you're able to affect that sound and you're able to route that sound to the places that you want it to go. A lot of times we just don't start there and we start to compound, put things on top of things when the foundation of it isn't very solid. And those things will find themselves at your last performance if you don't start with a great infrastructure.
Where do you start, Erik?
I mean, similarly, I think the other thing to note is, if you're just putting the drill on the field and getting all the things together, you've got a lot to think about, and maybe don't bring the electronics out for like a week. Make sure that we're playing together with the Met, because it can be distracting, especially if it's really loud out of the speaker and this is feeding back and all this other stuff. So, make sure the timing of when you're starting to implement it is correct too. And then I think I always try to have either a rehearsal, just the percussion and the sound system, or even just the sound system, where we're going through all of that and checking the things and making sure that it is all buttoned up and ready to go, so that when we are in rehearsal, we're able to kind of ease into it and not have it take over the whole rehearsal, because it can easily derail a rehearsal. There have been times where, something has gone wrong or whatever, and I'm like, hey, we're just going to turn it off and then we'll fix it for tomorrow, because we got more important things to do in August than spend 20 minutes trying to figure out which marimba cable is popping. Just mute them, move on, fix it, live to fight another day.
Yeah, and I do want to come back to best practices when it comes to running an ensemble rehearsal and where audio fits into that. We'll come back to that. But when you're first looking at the product and trying to decide where you're going to place microphones, especially as it pertains to what's on the field, not so much the front ensemble, because we kind of know where those are going to go. But where are you going to place microphones to pick up stuff from the field? How closely do you have to work with the visual people and with the music arrangers and the director on mic placement, Tony?
Well, I think that all of those decisions are made early on in the design process. And someone has to have a tonal concept of what your ensemble is going to sound like. And then you move to the score. Okay. So if we're going to feature the woodwinds here, then we need to know that the woodwinds naturally aren't going to carry as strong as a brass section. So they're going to require reinforcement. The first plan of attack is how that's written from the wind arranger. The second plan of attack is the supporting role that the acoustic percussion is going to play and where they're placed on the field. The third plan of attack is the electronics, what's supporting them from a synth, or are they tacit? Then you get to, okay, now we've tackled all of these things. Now, do we need to introduce a microphone to amplify or to reinforce that sound? To me, that's the hierarchy, because a lot of times we'll buy this equipment looking for a reason to use it. And that is when we get into trouble. It's like, man, I saw the blue coats and they had every yard line, had a shotgun mic on it. And I guess that's what we're supposed to do. Well, it started it in its infancy with a concept of what this ensemble is going to sound like. And it just so happens that it ended up in that place. And they had a lot of experts along that chain that made those decisions. It didn't start with 25 microphones.
Well, you almost sound like you reverse engineer it. You look at all of the other layers from the bottom up to what you actually want to be at the top of the balance in the end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the last thing I want to do is turn on a microphone, I think. I want the ensemble to sound as natural as it does. And then when you do introduce reinforcement into it, how can you make it invisible? Because when people see microphones or see speakers, then they start to hear it. So we want that to be as transparent as possible.
Erik, do you take that same approach, or how do you look at microphone placement?
Yeah, I think ideally all of those discussions are had, in the off season before, we're on the field and we can't hear the woodwinds and okay, where can we put a mic and where are they? So ideally, as you're crafting the show, you get your cut track together and then you start talking about, okay, orchestration, who's going to be the primary here, the secondary, tertiary, etc. And then again, before you're writing drill, before you're really arranging the music, you're talking about, okay, how are these elements going to interact? Do we really want to have this really cool snare drum moment with the woodwinds? It's a cool concept, but we're probably going to need some sort of amplification. Okay, so if we do, how are we going to do that? And if it's a field mic, we need to make sure we write the drills so that the drum line is not picked up by that mic. They're further away so that it's picking up just the woodwinds. And same thing with the front ensemble too. Hey, is this going to be a really kind of busy front ensemble? Is there a lot of electronics that are needed because of the music, and the woodwinds are on top, in which case, where are they going to be? Where are they going to come from? And so the more you can kind of plan ahead of time, the better your results will be. Now, obviously, you envision things will work one way and they don't, you need to adjust. But the more you can plan on the front end to where things aren't a surprise and, you're just throwing equipment at the problem, trying to solve it, I think you'll have a much better result that way.
That is a consideration that audio engineers in our activity have. Others don't, because if you're recording in the studio or even in a concert hall, things are at least stationary, if not isolated from one another. Out on that open field, sounds are traveling every which way. So that's a big challenge, isn't it? Picking not only the microphone placement, Tony, but the right kind of microphone.
Absolutely. And you're not going to get an opportunity to be in a venue like the one that you're going to end up in if you're going to Grand Nationals.
Sure.
So you have to use muscle memory and just experience throughout the years to kind of project what that's going to sound like and what the tendencies of that venue are. And knowing that most of the time on a Friday night, you're going to be at small town USA high school football stadium. And those require different, sonic reinforcement practices. So it's half of one and, whatever the saying is on that. I can't remember what that saying is, but
6 of one mic, half dozen of the other mic, I think is how.
That's it. There's a lot of projecting that you have to do while also serving the venue that you're in.
There are so many, especially in larger bands, there are so many cooks in the kitchen in terms of the different captions that are represented in an ensemble rehearsal, the arrangers, even the visual people factor into this in certain circumstances. How do you prioritize? Because everybody's got to be saying, well, I want to hear this solo that's going on, or I want to hear this secondary part that's being played on the marimba, or this electronics part. And you've got all of these different instructors with different priorities in your head trying to tell you what's important in the balance. Erik, how do you deal with that?
It varies from group to group. Some groups have designers who are in a lot more often than not. Some only see it on video. So that obviously, colors their opinion differently. I actually think marching band is a lot easier than drum corps because for the most part, the people that are there every day. Whereas drum corps, they're coming in and out and different people are running rehearsals. So depending on who's on tour, they're making adjustments and whatever. And then they go off and the next person comes in and does the opposite. So actually, I think it's a little bit more consistent. I think with marching band, the head band directors, they're the boss. They've got the final say. And so I kind of usually have it to where for the most part, I'm working with them directly. And if there's, something where someone wants something differently, we'll just have a discussion together. I think the more you can have everyone in the same room, but also in the same place. There's been a lot of times where, someone on the track or, just the front row is like, oh, this needs to be different. And it's totally different up in the box. So getting those people up there at the same time in the same spot, listening and then having a conversation together. And then, either agreeing to disagree, which is fine. There's a lot of things that are personal preference, judgment calls, and just making sure that the head band director kind of gets the final say and that you're collaborating with everyone to get to the best result that you can.
How do you handle those discussions, Tony?
I think Erik hit it right on the head. It's much easier in marching band because I usually try to establish a producer of the sound, a music director, someone where the buck stops. And with high school marching band, that's always going to be the head band director. They are the producer of the sound. That person can tell you exactly what they want. And it's much easier for me. I can go, okay, what do you hear? Close your eyes and tell me what you hear. What do you want to hear more or less of? That's easy. On the drum corps level, very much a challenge because everybody's right.
And ego plays a part too.
Exactly. And everybody's listening with different ears. The brass person is listening with brass ears. The percussion person is listening with percussion ears. And overall, there has to be a music director that just, whoever writes the check metaphorically, has to tell you this is what it's going to sound like. And you lock the reels on that. To me, that's priority in any place I go in is like, I want to have that conversation first because it can sound however you want it to sound. If you have the right engineers, you have the right equipment and the group's good, it can sound a number of different ways. But, that's why movies have directors. That's why studio albums have producers because you have to decide what the product is going to be.
We'll get into the best practices for tackling balance issues during rehearsal with Tony and Erik in a moment. First, a word from our sun safety partner, Outrun the Sun. I'm talking with dermatologist Dr. Christy Waterman about which is better, sunscreen lotions or sprays.
It's a common misconception that spray sunscreens can simply be sprayed on and that's it, you're good to go. In reality, spray sunscreens are supposed to be sprayed on in an even layer until your skin looks visibly wet and then thoroughly rubbed into the skin. This step is usually forgotten. So rubbing the spray into the skin creates an even layer of protection and allows that sunscreen to work as intended. But additional challenges occur for spray sunscreens if it's windy and part of the product blows away. It can be difficult to tell how much product is being applied. Also, don't forget to shake the can before applying. Otherwise, the product might separate and you might just get partial protection.
Sounds to me like you like lotions better than spray-ons.
I do think it's easier to tell how much is being applied and where. You're less likely to miss spots. Again, if you're rubbing it in, you really got to use that product correctly. So it's all about how you're using it, not just what you're using.
Next time, do you need as much sunscreen on a cloudy day? Our thanks to Outrun the Sun for being Bands of America's sun safety partner. Okay, let's get into the rehearsal piece then. How do you build into reps? How do you build into an overall ensemble rehearsal time for balancing through the audio board?
You have to do as much as you can before you get to that rehearsal in terms of you can balance just in a parking lot, the front ensemble with itself, just, making sure that this music sounds relative to itself, that the keyboards, you're getting a stand away from it. You can get that balance because when you get into the rehearsal, 99% of the time, the balance from a reinforcement standpoint isn't the priority. And if you want to see band directors get really nervous, start messing with knobs and having the band stand around out on the field while you're doing that. And it all comes from a place of good faith and honesty most of the time. They just don't know what you're doing. And it's hard to sit and go back and communicate back and forth with the director, like, I'm doing this. And, they don't want to hear about a compression knob at that time. They don't want to hear the ins and outs. So you want to be able to get it close so that your footprint on that rehearsal from a sound reinforcement standpoint is minimal. Also, any kind of remote situation that you can be doing at the time. I like to have, a lot of people are using main stage as the synth infrastructure. I like to be able to remotely control the mixer and remotely control main stage. So I can be doing those within the reps where, hey, what'd you think about how that piano was layered in? Oh, it just needs to be boosted a little bit. I can do a lot of those things without me having to yell down at, the synth players to do it, or even use a God mic, which is sometimes if you have the equipment, you can talk to the people down on the field without disrupting rehearsal. So I would say trying to have the smallest footprint you can in impacting that rehearsal from a sound reinforcement standpoint.
How about you, Erik?
Yeah, I mean, very similar. I bring my own spool of 300 feet of Cat5 cable to run from the mixer up to the top. So I don't have to worry about Wi-Fi dropping in and slowing out. And, because especially, in Texas, we've got this 8-hour rule. So that rehearsals, they're fast paced and there's not, oh, can we do another rep because the computer disconnected, So, similar to Tony, I've got the mixer up, I've got main stage up. I'm controlling within the reps. And then I think having the flexibility to where like, hey, we need to do a couple reps of just the trumpet or whatever. And so when I'm going into rehearsals, if I know there's going to be a couple of projects, where like, hey, we just got to hear this in the stadium through the system with everybody, the pit. I prep them ahead of time to have like visual projects, like, okay, have some body that, you need to work on, have the color guard know what they're going to do, have the drum line know that they're going to go off to the end zone for 10 minutes or whatever. So that if we do have to, stop the rehearsal, it's still productive, and just kind of get their minds around, if we're not just doing full reps, what else can we still do to make use of the time? And that kind of lowers the blood pressure. It's like, oh, well, we really do have to teach that choreo. It's like, well, perfect. We can dial in the solos. You teach the choreo to the rest of the band at the beginning, and then we can do ensemble and all the other stuff. So kind of having that plan to, if things do need to slow down to where the other sections are still being productive.
If you're repping as a full ensemble a chunk of the show and you're doing it, one more time, you're doing it several reps, is it practical for a marching band to build in a rep that's just for audio?
Yes, but that's where mitigating expectation comes in. You want to make sure that the director knows that ahead of time. I would even say like have a prep call the day before and say, hey, look, can we have, if we really want to tackle this project of balancing this moment where it's a full ensemble moment, we're going to have to hit this 3 or 4 or 5 times. So, if you have other things that are more priority, see if you can schedule them throughout another part of the week, because if you truly want to do this, we've got to give it the time and love that it commands.
Okay, this may be the biggest challenge that you face of all of them. And Tony, you alluded to it earlier, and that is a different venue possibly every weekend. Some of them outdoors, ultimately, if you're going to big shows in the Alamo Dome or St. Louis or Indianapolis, they're going to be indoors, even, Northern Arizona University, the Sky Dome there. So there are all these different venues with different acoustic challenges. You mentioned muscle memory, Tony, that not everybody who's going to be hearing this podcast is going to have that. So how do you make adjustments on the fly for the venue you're in?
Well, the last thing you want to do when you get to a show is to make major adjustments. And usually the balance of instruments within themselves should be relatively close. The thing that I would want to do when I get to a bigger venue is have control over the main fader, like the entire system, and what the subwoofer response is like, because that's usually the biggest thing, is the way subwoofer or sub bass sound reacts in a venue. I want to have control over bringing that up or down. I know that in San Antonio, the Alamo Dome is notorious for feedback in that kind of way. And you also want to look at how you've used reverb throughout, because Lucas Oil has reverb built into it. And so those are the three things that I try to keep a handle on. I don't want to go in and just, the marimbas, I need to EQ them. That's not where you want to be.
Erik, do you EQ for inside, outside? How do you adjust for the differences?
Mostly it's in setting up your mixer file to be flexible enough to make those adjustments without affecting a lot of things. So I put all of, my instruments into DCAs, which are essentially groups. So one fader that can control all the marimbas, or all the vibes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I make those faders safe, which means if you have different scenes that are recalling different settings, those faders don't change. They're always the same, which means if you go into, let's say, a stadium that's got a big wall, right? And you get feedback from your marimbas, I could just turn that marimba fader down a little bit, and I'll still have all my other level changes throughout the show. They're just two less relatively. Whereas if you don't have that, you can turn the marimbas down in scene one, but as soon as you go to the next scene, you're going to have feedback. And every time you change the scene, you're going to get feedback. So having some, those groups, and obviously like my main faders, and I like having separate control over the subs as well, being able to adjust those just kind of once, and still have your scenes is a really good way to kind of help mitigate for the venue. Another kind of trick that I tell my clients is if you have a pre-show or whatever the first thing that happens in your show electronically is, know exactly how it's supposed to sound, how it's supposed to feel from a volume standpoint, from a sub standpoint, from an overall clarity standpoint, and then use that as your reference when you're in a different venue and go, wow, I don't hear any subs. Normally I feel my chest rumbling there. Maybe we need to bring the subs up, or vice versa. And so kind of using that as your sound check, that we just don't have the luxury of because of the time constraints.
Tony, is that what you meant by muscle memory? Is knowing what the show should feel like and sound like?
Absolutely. Knowing what the show should sound like, and knowing the venues, having been there before, how those frequencies and how those sounds are going to react in that venue. All of those kind of play into the muscle memory narrative.
If it's a venue that you've not been in before, watch a band before you, watch a couple bands and just notice the trends. Wow, everyone's marimbas are like really loud, or just the sub is really loud. Wow. If it's 2 or 3 bands that all have kind of the same things, that's probably a venue specific thing. So when you're going in, you're having that in your mind. And if you have, you're on the phone to the person on the board, or there's some sort of communication, go, hey, the subs might be hot. So first thing, be ready to bring them down. So you're prepping. You're not overreacting. You're not making changes before hearing them, but you're kind of putting them on high alert saying, hey, this is the adjustments we might make. Be ready.
Okay. This has been great. I think we've already imparted a lot of valuable information. You guys know this better than me. So what am I leaving out? What are we missing that you would want to make sure that any band audio engineer is thinking about this season?
I would say try not to do different things on the day of the show. I know there's a lot of nervous energy, and try to build those routines and protocols into your daily operations. If this person plugs this in this day, let that person plug it in every day. So you want, when you roll up to a show, for that day to be as boring as possible from the standpoint of protocols and procedures. It's not the day for the alpha band dad to now all of a sudden push this piece of equipment, or this mom's been great, so let her plug this in. Make those procedures be, you're going to have enough of the outside environmental things that you have no control over, that you want to go in being able to control as much of these things as possible. That's my biggest advice.
Consistency.
Yes.
Erik?
Like, you have to be paranoid before the show because there's so many things you need to check. And, people look at me like I'm crazy. They're like, you checked every knob, every button, everything. It's like, yeah, because I've had performances where I didn't, and that thing got turned, and all of a sudden you've got all this feedback because your speaker is 20 decibels louder than normal. So I'm a big believer in checklists. Every piece of equipment should have a checklist. So if it's a speaker, what yard line, how far front to back, if there's knobs or buttons on it. This knob should be at 12 o'clock. This button should be pressed. This button should be unpressed. This button should be on. This button should be off. Your mixer, are the wireless mic receivers on? Are both antennas plugged in? Do you have signal from, your stage box? That kind of Houston NASA control checklist that you go through. And then the other thing is have some sort of sound check to make sure that you're getting sound from your synthesizers and that you're getting sound to the speakers. I really like to try to incorporate that into the theme in a way that is imperceptible as a sound check to the audience. So, some people, it's like left speaker, right speaker, center, which is fine until your right speaker doesn't work. And then it goes left speaker. And now everyone in the audience knows that something has gone wrong, right? So I like to ask the sound designer, like, hey, can you give me like a 5-minute loop of some sort of atmospheric thing that fits the show? And then some sort of unique sample that fits with that atmosphere, but is individually identifiable. So like, let's say you've got like a forest show, right? So it's like the kind of the crickets and the bugs and that kind of sound bed, right? And maybe you've got like a bird call is like this one speaker, and maybe there's like a creaking tree branch is the other, and then the wind is the other. So now I can tell I've got all of my speakers. And if the birdie doesn't sing, no one in the audience is going, oh my gosh, that speaker's not working.
Yeah.
But you, the people who know it's not working, and then you can fix it. And more importantly, the students aren't going, oh my gosh, I didn't hear the thing, and their mindset is getting all crazy. So I wish we had a curtain. I wish we had doors where we can do our sound check, not in front of the public eye, but that's not the case. But you still need to do those things. So finding a way to do them as inconspicuously as possible, you kind of get to have the best of both worlds.
Well, I've totally geeked out on this, guys. This has been fantastic. I think you really have imparted some great information that folks can put to use right away. So, Erik, Tony, thank you so much.
For sure. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Great to be here.
Erik Kosman is an active audio engineer and consultant for some of the country's top marching ensembles, including the Woodlands, Hebron, and Flower Mound High Schools. Tony Lymon's a freelance pageantry designer from Mississippi and the former audio caption head for Carolina Crown. This weekend, Bands of America has regionals in Waco, Texas, Orlando, Florida, and Johnson City, Tennessee, plus the first super regional of the season in the Dome at America Center in St. Louis. And that's where we have some special Break Ranks coverage planned for next week's show. So until then, Break Ranks is presented in association with Outrun the Sun, Music for All Sun Safety Partner. I'm Dan Potter. Go for it. Break Ranks.